right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. Today, I am Chamberlain.
And I'm Nelta Igbe. Good morning.
Well, it's raining cats and dogs and mangoes here in Lagos, and it's thundering, but we're grateful to be here. Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
Well, it just so happens that today is September 12. It's a Tuesday morning. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Okay. Therefore, I'm not sure whether I heard Buki well. I thought she said something like raining cats and dogs.
I think she said some mangoes fell in front of her house, something like that.
Okay. Well, whatever it's worth. But I'm glad
you didn't pick up anything.
Don't pick up anybody.
Might have been late to work.
It's good that you're in the studio, Bukola, and we missed you. But talking about things falling, this is a season of palliatives when everyone, indeed, everyone's looking for or hoping that some kind of palliative will fall their way. And I know some people will shoot me here when I see what I'm about to say now. Palliatives are coming your way. Don't ask me how. But I listened to something yesterday. I think that was the governor of Akwa Ibom State. It was a soundbite, something he said in an interview with our colleague, Harry. He said the states should be allowed to, or did he say allowed, or the state should come up with their own implementation plan? Interesting. I mean, they know what's happening there. Just like somewhere in news yesterday, there was this suggestion that DPOs be posted to their local government area.
Isn't that feeding into what they've been talking about all the while in terms of the component of having, reorganize the police force?
All about policing and ensuring that the people are safe. So that suggestion by the Akwa Ibom State governor for the states to come up with their own implementation plan, that would make it easier for the party, or that would make it clear. But the other side is also, it's not just about coming up with an implementation. It's also being able to communicate this plan to the people. You know, that's one of the issues we've had with government in Nigeria. Those who are in government or who are governing do not think it's necessary to talk to the people. Please, don't get me wrong. You talk to the press, you come out, you are making announcements, you're putting out statements, but the people are not hearing you. Communication is complete when the person on the other side can articulate what you've said and would have understood and is ready to run with it. So that's when communication is done, when the other person actually understands what you're saying. So even if the plan comes up, or when these plans come up, because I know that some states have already started distributing farming inputs, fertilizers. Some are distributing food, like the Borno State governor, and some other states have different things they are distributing in the form of palliatives. But what's the plan? And how much of it do the people understand so that they do not think that they are being shortchanged? Let it be that when you're serving, as the Kaduna State government says, when you're serving, service is about making life better for your people, that you actually get this service to the people in a way that they will appreciate it. It's like a farmer in Borno who's thinking about how to go to farm. You come and give him, what is it that you give him a sewing machine. He'll be wondering, I'm a farmer, what I need are fertilizers or improved seedlings so that I can go to my farm, and then security. So I can go to the farm, till and plant, and then when it's time to harvest, I'm able to harvest what I need to go to the market. So come up with the implementation plans for the palliatives and ensure that the people communicate it to the people, and then actually go ahead to begin to implement the distribution of the palliatives so that the people can also appreciate what it is that you're doing. Ayo, Buki. For Chamberlain.
Okay, so let it go around. The palliatives distribution is one big talking point, indeed, Nyota. And if we look at, the approach of the state governors, we must, critique the implementation strategy, or more importantly, the areas of investment of these palliatives. Yes, indeed, it's very good, commendable, to distribute grains and fertilizers to farmers. But it goes back to that sticking point from the onset about how the federal government under the new administration didn't quite have that plan about, how to tackle the impact of the removal of fuel subsidy in the first place, which is what's important. Getting the refineries to work, that's the real problem. And of course, there are other areas that also deep, big holes in the pockets of Nigerians. That's the electricity sector, payment of, electricity bills, the unending increase in tariffs because their own sector is also denominated in dollars. But then again, I believe that what's important that will, plug the holes in the pockets of Nigerians is investment in sectors where, they would have to spend less. For instance, some states have taken delivery of buses. Some of them are not CNG powered. We had the chief of staff to the governor of one of the northern states on the program last week, who talked about how they have an alternative plan to power those buses with diesel. So, and of course, investment in the informal sector. In Bayelsa State, for instance, I believe they had been distributing funds to entrepreneurs to scale up their businesses. Those are the real sectors, enabling Nigerians to move with ease, and plugging the holes in their pockets financially, investments in businesses, reduction of taxes. I believe in Kaduna State also, there's also investment in the health sector. Some of these funds, the palliative distribution is also being plowed into the health sector. Without, a strategic approach and a rethinking, thinking this plan outside the box rather than the piecemeal distribution of grains and bags of rice. The bags of rice will finish, particularly for a household of 5 to 10 persons, especially in the north, where the households are more in number. The bags of rice will finish eventually. So what's important is plugging the holes of the pockets of, breadwinners of Nigerians. Ayo.
I think one of I don't think people realize how important the last bit of what you said, is, which is the fact that it's not just giving, it's how sustainable and how enduring in the hands of the people that have these things. It's also gratifying to know that at least government thought in the way of saying, let's identify the right people that really deserve to get these palliatives. So when the 36 state governors at the beginning were asking questions about the veracity or otherwise of the beneficiaries, the social register, the list of the social register, I mean, it calls to question a number of things, but a good number of people is also saying something like, so if this is the reality that we have to contend with, how was that list come up with in the first place? We know that, of course, it's something powered, supported by the World Bank, and the states were contacted as at the time. How far with the verification exercises that the state governments are going about? I think that is one question to ask. And the second thing about that is the questions that are being asked by several people, including Serap, saying, let's have details of the spending, at least of the 2 billion naira that 6 state governors or so have already received. How are they being distributed? At the end of the day, it's about accountability. It's about openness. It's about building trust in government, because people have no confidence in government anymore. I mean, coming from no less a person than the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on Presidential Committee on the reforms of the tax system in Nigeria yesterday. So that is another thing. So it is it'll be very interesting to find out not just how government does it, but how the people are reacting to it. You mentioned one or two states the other time, Borno states, for instance, they said they have gotten vehicles, quite a number of vehicles for the people. Niger workers, for instance, they rejected the government's palliative plans in their own state, and of course they will have their reasons. So they intend to boycott the palliative distribution committee set up by the government. That's according to the NLC. They said that the deliberate plan of the government to skim out the working class and pensioners has triggered serious tension among members. That's for Niger State. It's not the same everywhere else. In Akwa Ibom State, for instance, by the way, on a comical note, I just Googled Akwa Ibom Palliatives, and guess what came up? Akwa Ibom Palliative Warehouse. And it shows me a direction. I don't know where that is. Anyway, it's very interesting that the government says that they have gazetted something in the region of 2,272 villages that they're going to visit, possibly have already visited. It'll be good to know how the people are reacting to these things.
Sure.
Is it that we don't know, we don't want to celebrate good news? Who are the people that are benefiting from these things? Let someone come up with these ideas and let people know that these things are actually working. A situation where people have question marks on any good intention of government. I'm not sure it's something. I mean, look at this.
Yeah.
What will you call this one? Okay, these are the things that some people are receiving one way or the other. It is, whether or not it is something acceptable to people, I guess it depends on who is receiving these things.
You know, Ayo, you're right about accountability being, you know, the most important principle that should guide the distribution of palliatives. If the governors, if the states have jettisoned the social register, you know, put together by the last administration, and they're adopting another, what's the approach to distribution? And the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs had said that they're, you know, taking a second look at the register, and they're coming up with something with the states of the Federation. But the distribution of palliatives has gone on in most states of the Federation. So what are they using? And what's that collaboration that we ought to be seeing between the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and the states of the Federation on the development of an alternative register that should have guided the distribution of these palliatives in the first place? But what's the palliative distribution looking like in your state? Let us know. Share your thoughts with us.
Chamberlain?
It was NEC that said, well, we think this social register could not be relied upon 100%. They jettisoned it at the time. They didn't trust the process. And it went on. So that was out there. And then they decided to go back, come up with their own strategy to distribute some of these palliatives to their citizens, as it were. So now the thing is, so since they had criticized the previous register, so now we'll all be watching to see, let's see if they could do or go one step better. Because now, if they claim there wasn't transparency in the former register, let's see what they have. Has anybody seen any list? What are they using exactly? Because, I mean, yes, you guys rightly pointed out, they need to publish it. Let everybody then go ahead and see, let them show us the way that, look, okay, the last one wasn't that transparent, but this one, have a look. This is how we're proceeding with it. Then people have something to leverage on, because we also need to interrogate the process and question all of those things, because at the end of the day, yeah, good to see they're buying CNG buses, distributing all of those things, but consistency and how sustainable is it? Look, those buses have got to go like clockwork. It must not break down. You don't tell them, oh, there was no CNG, this bus cannot move, and then people can't get to work. Because if they're going to rely on it, it shouldn't be a short-term measure. Yeah. I say that because, look, guys, which states? Just go to any states. Remember there were the buses at that time, several years ago. What has become of those buses now? So are we not sure that, look, you just know what people can do by what has happened before. It's just out there for you to go and see. So we'll watch and see if we like to be wrong on this one, actually. So that is there on a consistent basis, because that's what we're asking. What is the template? Where are they going to be servicing those CNG buses? What packages? What agreement do they have? What have they signed? People would need to know. If they have to plan their movement or anything around all of those things, they need to be sure. If they're going to jettison several other options and rely on this one, what do they know about all of this? So that is going to be interesting. And Labour protesting about some of those. Remember when NLC went on that protest, that was part of it. I mean, TUC didn't pull out. They were not part of it in the first place because their centre was not part of that strike. So that's why Labour went on its own with that one. Yes, they've always spoken about refineries, which we understand. I think they've told us several times that this year, the refineries will be up and running, the PH refinery this year. So we're looking to see what happens. And will it have an impact on the price of petrol? Everybody wants to see that price dip. Everybody wants it to dip because inflation just keeps catching up with everything.
Beyond the effects on the price of petrol is the byproducts from refining.
Oh, the big question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
I remember that.
We had a guest here one time that told us that if the cost of a barrel of crude is how many dollars? About $87 or thereabout. I'm not sure what the figure is at the moment. But then he said, by the time they are done, the byproducts from that one barrel could give fetches as much as $2,000.
So they should talk to us about that as well. We need to ask questions of all of these things. So nobody should pull a wool over our eyes. Okay, so states, what committee, what plan are you using? Are you involving students? What about companies, SMEs, corporations who their workers, the inflation has caught up with them? How do they don't benefit from the palliatives? What becomes of those people, those class of people?
Opportunities to create jobs.
We're all affected by this fuel price, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take a look at New Telegraph as we take you into reviewing some of the dailies we've got for you here this morning. PEPC Judgement. I mean, yeah, I know, there's that confusion. Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, Presidential Election Petition Court, whichever way. PEPC Judgment. Now look at this. New Telegraph leaves with Abuja indigenes set to demand for governor, 3 senators, reps, state assembly to approach courts over verdicts which confers state status on the FCT SAN backs suits. SANs. What do you expect? SANs will back it, of course. Who's going to argue your case? So they will back the suits in whichever way it swings. So, oh yeah, this will be very interesting. Remember, the court had ruled that, well, concerning that 25% component to be declared president in FCT, say, look, this should be regarded as any other state. No special status for the FCT. Are you telling me FCT indigenes or residents will have more rights, special status than all the other states? What did they contribute to the national purse? What is this? What is the... Okay. Now, the residents, the indigenes want to go test the laws. So, what a scenario we've got on our hands. How will it play out? Are we going to see some surprises like we've seen in some court judgments?
I mean, I see a lot of work for our courts coming up and the National Assembly.
So what then happened? I mean, maybe some lawyers will have to hear the arguments go back and forth on this one. If they say, no, or would the court say, this is not what we meant. For goodness me. It was what, 11, 12 hours judgment the day we spent in court on that day?
Chamberlain, you'll get an understanding somehow.
Okay, so we're looking to see that one. Cashless e-payments gain traction. Hit 54.36 trillion naira in August. Who knows? Okay, guys, look, let's say we don't have that in Telegraph, do we? I see it. Okay, that's sleeping with a fan. Sleeping with a fan on may trigger allergies. Described to experts. That's the Telegraph this morning.
Okay. Well, leadership is the next one here, and hopefully there will be no allergies triggered here. They lead with that story of the Nigeria-UAE deal. Experts predict rise in foreign investment revenue boost. That story continues on page 4. But above that, now this one here, yesterday the news broke of the passing of the doyen of counting. Akintola Williams, and so many things just coming up about the things he started. For instance, he brought Lions Club into Nigeria, the humanitarian organizations and all of that. But hey, God rest his soul. Let's see here. So, Sanwo-Olu Abiodun Obasanjo orders mourn. That's on page 4, and above that, Zenith Bank, brother. 11 died. This is not good. This is in Adama. 11 died, 10 missing in another Adama boat mishap. That's on page 6. So let's look at, if we're going to use the waterways for transportation, there are certain things that need to be in place. Life jackets. You need to set up a Coast Guard, something to just ensure that those who are moving on the waterways are somewhat like monitored, and there would be quick response time to any mishap whatsoever on the waterways. Then page 15 has a story, insecurity, IGP reviews firearms licensing regulations. That's on page 15. They did not talk about when Nigerians are allowed to carry weapons, what will be the guidelines around it, and all of that. So
some do already. It's just
illegal.
No.
There are many who have this firearm.
No, I mean, for some who do, of course, you have to have the license.
Yeah.
So for those who do, they've got to have the license.
You know, there was that committee that was set up to check proliferation of small arms.
Well.
So all of that needs to be looked into. Mieti Allah begs FG for palliatives for herders. Check page 6 for more on that.
Palliatives for herders?
For herders, yes. That's Mieti Allah, the Cattle Breeders Association. And that's it from this one. US marks 22 years of 9/11 at Al-Qaeda attacks.
Those cars are pretty expensive these days.
Cows, right? Are people still buying?
Oh, of course they'll buy.
That's it from Leadership Newspaper.
And up next is the Guardian newspaper this morning, which also follows up on the landmark diplomatic achievement of the president yesterday following his visit to the UAE. But, you know, it chooses to tell the story in a slightly different way. Listen to this. Cautious optimism as FG adopts piecemeal negotiation out of $800 million stock funds. So here are the riders with a picture inset of, a flying aircraft. Almost 1 year of visa ban lifted. Over $800 million of foreign airlines funds stuck in Nigeria. FG-UAE may explore Egypt's bailout option. So what's the Egypt bailout option? You'll have to find out on the inside pages of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Well, we need to understand that what happened yesterday was much more than that suspension on visa issuance for Nigerians, but on a bigger diplomatic level, there's investment coming into Nigeria as a result of that meeting. There's also a foreign liquidity program, that an agreement on that's also coming out of that meeting. But whether this is also part of negotiation for the trapped $800 million foreign airlines funds, we do not know. But of course, in the coming days, perhaps if we have the president's spokesperson on media again, Mr. Ajirin Gilali, will be asking if this is also part of it.
Well, from the headline of the Guardian newspaper this morning, you'll find out that it's somehow embedded because
related, right?
Piecemeal negotiation. In other words, we don't have $800 million in our pocket to pull out for you. And believe me, I would say that was more of a business negotiation because it's better someone is owing you than someone is not owing you in business. So maybe that's the conversation around that, because with over $800 million stuck, most certainly there is a lot more at stake than $800 million for any right-thinking business person, especially for a country like Nigeria. And the fact that quite a number of Nigerians actually go to Dubai, to do business and some other things like that. So yeah, those conversations are there. What we will only hope to see is how does this play out going forward. I think that's going to be important.
Nigerians must also, especially at the presidential level, explore ways of making these bilateral relations more symbiotic, such that more of those forex will, come into Nigeria rather than it being taken out. Nigerians do a lot of business in Dubai because Dubai is a good place to do business in. Nigeria can also be a good place to do business in, where the expatriates will be coming in, so that more of those dollars will remain at home.
I think that's the idea of this whole conversation in the first place. We've been working at making our ease of doing business parameters better. How we go about it going forward, I think we just have to wait to see.
Yeah, there are quite a number of other interesting stories on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning. Listen to this one. Not so cheery, unlike the first. Nigeria's microfinance banking dream on brink of failure. So what's happening to that sector? what is it? The small, medium businesses that have refused to pay up their loans? What's happening to the management of banking in that sector?
You know,
why has it not stood the test of time?
We need certain parameters, including what I call business education and the discipline and prudence of our people. It's in terms of doing business. Remember People's Bank? People's Bank went under because we were unable as a people to sustain it. I won't put it in the hands of the management. I'll put it in the hands of the people who collected loans and did not pay back. Microfinance banks, you know, also were quite something, you know, in the 90s and even in the early 2000s and also. Some of them are still existent, but the issues that are being raised here by the Guardian newspaper, definitely something worth looking at.
Interesting. Perhaps in the future, that's if it's not already been incorporated into the leadership system of microfinance banking. But if it hasn't, business education should be incorporated. A very good point there. This is also just as important. 78,000 Nigerians die yearly from cancer. That's also on the inside pages, page 5. So what's happening there? Is it lifestyle, or is it, you know, something to do with the environment? Something for us to reflect on this morning as we leave it there for the Guardian newspaper.
Business Day is next, and talking about business, the lead story is rather interesting. U.S. visa denials squeeze Nigerian students. What does that mean? This rather gives a hint. Nigerian students hit 30-year high in 2022. That story is attributed to the U.S. Embassy. Find the details. Continue on the inside pages. And there's another story, well, other stories right on the front page there beside that main story. Clearing FX backlog to restore investor confidence and Naira stability. It's a story you definitely want to give a bit more attention. Tinubu's visit. UAE lifts travel ban on Nigeria, among other stories you'll find quite interesting right there on the front page. That's the Business Day newspaper today.
Okay, quite interesting scenarios there in terms of this cancer scenario. Yeah, lifestyle, yes, the environment, yes, the food regulation. People don't even know what they consume. Many outlets there, be it supermarkets or pharmacies, they have expired products. People buy these things, they don't even come down to check. Bodies that are supposed to check, some slap, kick back, a lot just goes on. Just go to any shelf, walk into any shelf, and you see. And then when you see them, they start begging you, oh, please. It's not about begging, no. You're playing with people, because when you walk out there, they sell it to the very next person. So these things, there's just a lot. And it's, yeah, of course, it's tough in society. They don't give you any chance to go do certain things. But you know what they say, even if you have those traits or genes or your lifestyle triggers it. So people need to pay attention to their health. Okay, take a look at Vanguard newspaper. Federalism at grassroots. 17 states run 323 local government areas with caretaker committees. Can you beat that? Yeah, to focus a lot, they talk about the federal government, the center, this and that. Look at what the states are doing. Practice breaches Section 7 of Constitution. Look at the culpable states. Anambra, Imo, Borno, others emerge as worst states. Northeast worst hit with 91 of 112 local government areas affected. Southeast follows with 65 of 95, almost all of them. LGA is hit. Northwest emerges best with 149 of 186 LGAs under democracy. We have peculiar circumstances in the country, ascribed to NULGE. Aggrieved councils should go to court. NGF source. Imo will hold LG poll this year. Zodema. Governors carried out coups against LGAs. Bakoba. Democracy not working at LGAs. Akane. So it goes back to the state. So as much as they could shout in terms of what's going on at the federal government level, we need to pay a lot more attention to how are the governors running the states. So do they constitute themselves as emperors in those states? Do they allow for democracy? Do they allow free press? Do they allow questions? Or do they allow residents in their states breathe? Yeah, because it's not enough for us to talk about the federal. We need to look at what's going on with the states too and call them out where you need to. Doesn't matter who's Oxigo, whoever they feel, whether they feel you support them or not. Look, the right things have got to be done in the country, period. Expelling Wike from PDP, a task that must be done. Atiku scamp. And then funding, FG will grant varsities full autonomy. Minister, okay. So, brain drain, some departments in teaching hospitals shutting down. MD Khan raises alarm. So that's a lot going on there, guys. Well, there you go. That ends it with a look at some of the dailies here today. We will be back in a moment. Stay on with us.
Long-awaited presidential election petition court's judgment is here, and as expected, the courtroom is a flurry of activities. Vice President Kashim Shettima, the APC National Chairman, Mr. Abdullahi Ganduje, the Chief of Staff to the President, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, and the National Security Advisor, Mr. Nuhu Ribadu, are all present to witness the judgment. Others are the governors of Kogi, Imo, Nasarawa, Yobe, Zamfara, Bauchi, and Ekiti states. The national chairman of the Labour Party, Mr. Julius Abure, and the Minister of Aviation, Mr. Festus Keyamo, are also present in court. The five-member panel of justices arrives and goes right into delivering judgment in that petition. In the petition of the Allied People's Movement, APM, chairman of the panel, Justice Haruna Samani, who read the judgment, held that the issue of membership and qualification of the APC candidates raised by the APM in its petition are pre-election matters that could only be determined by the Federal High Court. The court also upheld the preliminary objections of the respondents who challenged the competence of the suit. Justice Samani notes that since the petition centered on the qualification of President Tinubu to contest the presidential election, the APM ought to have gone to court within 14 days after Mr. Tinubu was nominated by the All Progressives Congress, APC. He also held that since the course of action bordered on a pre-election matter, the APM lacked the locus standi to challenge President Tinubu's nomination, as the Supreme Court had earlier decided that the political party does not have the right to challenge a nomination that was made by another political party. Next, the panel makes a pronunciation on the petition of the Labour Party. The court held that the petitioners made generic allegations without giving specifics of allegations of complaints of particular polling units where election did not take place. Neither did they specify particulars of polling units where there were alleged complaints of irregularities. The court also stated that the petitioner failed to establish that INEC deliberately refused to promptly upload polling unit results to IREV in order to manipulate the result in favor of President Tinubu on the 25% requirement. The court held that there is no special status attached to the FCT, as it is equal to every other state in Nigeria. On the president's alleged drug trafficking conviction and the forfeiture of $460,000 in the US, the court held that the petitioners failed to show evidence that President Tinubu was ever convicted, and the court cited an exhibit tendered by President Tinubu's legal team, a letter written by the U.S. Embassy stating that had no criminal record in the U.S. Going by the provisions of Section 137 of the Constitution, the court held that President Tinubu is therefore not disqualified, and the issue is resolved against the petitioner. On the issue of substantial non-compliance with the provisions of the law, especially with regards to non-transmission of result sheets to IREV, the court held that there is no law that says INEC must mandatorily transfer or transmit the result of the election from the polling units electronically. The court states that the law simply empowers INEC to decide the means of collation of results and transmission of same.
This issue of non-compliance is directly standing on the first ground of this petition. Thus, by paragraph 16A of the petitioner stated that the election of the second respondent is invalid by reason of non-compliance with the provisions of the Electoral Act 2022. By Section 1341B of the Electoral, non-compliance with the Act is a ground for questioning or challenging an election. Primarily, the law is well settled that the results declared by ANEC first respondent in an election enjoy a presumption of legality. In other words, they are prima facie correct. Section 168 of the Evidence Act 2011, recently applied by the Supreme Court in Atuma and ANEC and APC.
The last petition to be decided is that of the PDP and its presidential candidate. After a review of the evidence and documents tendered, the court struck out the evidence of some of Mr. Atiku's witnesses on the grounds that their witness statements on oath were not filed along with his petition. The court also expunged 37 exhibits tendered by the witnesses from the court records. On the inability of the election officers to transmit, of the 27 witnesses called by the petitioner, 10 were polling unit agents who testified as to how the elections were conducted in their different polling units.
The petitioners did not call any of their agents at the polling units. The said agents at the polling units were the ones who were meant to sign and collect duplicates of results from UC8A. The few agents called were state and national collection agents. Largely, their testimonies were hearsay. Let us now examine their evidence before the court.
All 10 of the witnesses testified that the voting went well and was peaceful in their different polling units. However, they all said they could not upload results electronically to the INEC IREV, so they entered the results manually and took same to the ward and the State Collation Center. The witnesses were emphatic that voting went well. Part agents signed the results, but the only difficulty was in uploading the result electronically. Attention will now shift to the Supreme Court, where parties dissatisfied with this judgment can go and appeal. That appeal is to be decided within 60 days from this judgment.
All right, welcome back. Yes, we'll be taking a look at our reactions to that judgment and more here today on the program. And as you've seen there, we're joined by Professor Oke Ikechukwu, Executive Director, Development Specs Academy, as well as Laulu Akonde, former presidential aide. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Morning.
Before we go into this matter, let me just, we started out talking about 5 billion received by, well, I think about 2 billion has been given to them, but 5 billion approved for palliative distribution. And we're seeing reactions across different states in terms of what's going on, is it going on properly? We also have seen Labour in Niger State protesting, saying, well, they followed the process. And the NLC also did protest. In fact, before the protest, they did say, look, we don't trust governors. They will mess up this system. So 5 billion, who knows? But now, I know that at that NEC meeting too, the governor did speak up about the National Social Register. It didn't have integrity. They couldn't utilize it. And so that gave rise to them going back to their states and coming up with a plan. So, Prof, let's start with you. What's your impression about how they're going on with this so far?
They're not going on with anything so far. They've not started. I may be mistaken. 5 billion promised, 2 billion reportedly delivered. I can speak of how they're going on if there's been some element of execution, in which case some people are saying, okay, it's not going fast enough. Some people have got it, we haven't got it. Even those complaining about the governors, they might be speaking from hindsight, but the truth is that no governor has acted on it. So it's not entirely fair to presume that it will go wrong. My summary take, that palliative thing should have come probably within a week of the president's announcement. Because knowing he was going to make that announcement on the day of the inauguration, it would have been actually very exciting. Also have a template of execution almost immediately. That will have energized people, that will have given some confidence. It took long enough. They said it's 5 billion. The other issue with the 5 billion, of course, is that the states are not equal numerically. So if you talk about quantitative equality, because it's quantities here we're talking about, not quality, a state with, let's assume there's a state with 3 million population, another one with 8 million, give both by 5 billion. You can see what the implications are. So those are details, tactical details that probably, or logistical details that could have been better thought out. But the important thing is people need to see the effect. Labour, Nigel, the people who are protesting, I hope they don't collapse out of hunger because it's been how many months? It's impacting national productivity. A lot of people can't go to work. Transport fares have gone up, but income has not. This is a time of paying school fees. A lot of people are sweating.
But we have seen some states, I mean, they usually have this, quote, fanfare, for want of words, and with the distribution. And sometimes they have, it's in the public glare.
Yeah.
What they say is distribution with palliatives. Can that pass for it?
Oh, it can, but whether it is another matter, because from experience, and I'm talking about hands-on experience in at least 4 different instances in the past, whether it was NDE, whether it was UWIN, etc., where the beneficiaries sign up for X and get Y. But the important thing is that they get something. At the state level, it's all contrived, but the issues are on the table. The issues on the table are 3. The impact of the subsidy removal is terrible on a lot of people. Government has not been totally insensitive to the extent that it even made that provision. What needs to happen is that whatever is going to get to the people, despite the fact that it will have short-term benefit, let it get to them as quickly as possible. That's what needs to happen.
Well, I mean, just to back up what Prof has said, I think we have to have a serious discussion about how to deliver what it is that government has for the people. That's a very big problem there. First of all, there is this massive distrust between government and the people generally, and especially when it regards what it is that government is, offering to people, whether in terms of, social services, even as an example. And that is why the discussion around whether it is 5 billion, is 2 billion, is an important discussion, but, often the people don't get the maximum impact of whatever it is that is sent to them. That's the first thing. And then secondly, I think our political leaders also need to be taken through a much rigorous accountability process. And I'm not quite sure what has to happen, for us to get to that point. These are political leaders. They derive their legitimacy from the people. And so there should be a way in which they can be held accountable for whether they deliver or they don't deliver. I mean, look, for instance, what is going on. So like Prof said, there's a lot of hardship, especially look at transportation. The rates have gone gone so much up. Mm-hmm. And it will seem as if, we should have the buses here now. The president made the announcement on May 29. Today is September 12. Roughly, I think we have about 3 months already. Where are the buses? It's only Borno State. Governor Zulum, who I saw yesterday, has been able to get about maybe 700.
Adama also did something.
That kind of palliative would have actually impacted. Bring the buses. At least let's make sure that we solve the problem of transportation. And then in terms of feeding,
if I may come here, Adama also did something, and they bought their own buses from locally made buses. Yeah, that's Adama State. But now, there are some who will be wondering, where are you coming from? You're practically part of this government, so to speak. So he's part of the government. I mean, he's of the from APC to APC. So one will say, Lal, where are you coming from? You're talking about holding the government accountable. Yes, the president made that declaration. There are state governments, and many of them are of your party. What are they doing? Are they even talking to the people? How do you hold the government accountable? When would government, leadership, and Prof, you can weigh in on this, when would leadership in Nigeria learn to come down and talk to the people? Explaining to the people in simple terms, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. This is how it will come to you. This is when it will come to you. And let it get to you, even if it is 1, not 10.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to clarify that issue. And quite a few people still think that I speak for government. I actually had to do a tweet on Friday to say, no, I no longer speak I'm not a presidential spokesperson. I'm not currently a member of the government. Yes, I have my inclination towards progressive politics, and I'm not going to deny that. But currently, I'm just an ordinary citizen who also has a voice and who will certainly continue to engage on the issues. Because look, the bigger issue is that we have to find a way, even whether we are in government or we are outside government, our voices about accountability must be very, very pitched. It must be pitched very high, because it would take the people, all of us, wherever we are, inside government, outside government, journalists, labor, experts, people in government. It will take all of us to be on our toes. And this is a democracy. We have to hold our leaders to account. And it has to start from this kind of engagement, intellectual engagement, calling people out when they have to be called out, and bringing the issues in the open. And this is something that all Nigerians must do, which is why our point is important that, look, how do you deliver the goods? How do you create impact? Like he said, look, I mean, if what has been promised has been delivered, even by now, there would have been a little bit of relief for the people, but there's still a lot of hardship. And we know that government has, the president says all of the right things, but it's important for the president, and I made this point the last time, that there must be an effective coordination of whatever it is that is happening, almost on a daily basis, and putting the ministers on the ball that what is going on here. There must be that kind of, and the country should see it. We should, just like you said, the people who are in government should on a continuous basis open up the process so that people will know at least what is being done.
Prof. Well, I think Laulu spoke about the leaders deriving legitimacy from the people. My take is that is only partly true. Most of them, if the news out there is correct, derive their legitimacy from their pocket. If I spend money in order to get into public office, I've already settled the people up front. It doesn't matter what I do. And that's what we're witnessing in many places. So the crisis of legitimacy is part of the problem on the table. The expectation and assumption that people in office, they're just there to make sure that Nigerians are happy. If I set out to go to the National Assembly in order to get rich, or as a governor, and look at the amount I spent to get the form, look at my salary for 5 years, it probably wouldn't cover that. You must know that I have other things in mind. So I thought I should make this point so that the presumed altruism of leadership is not taken to be there when it is not. But ideally, leadership is responsible management of state affairs. Now, the point you made, what was it he responded to? The immediate point he responded to, what was the anchor again?
Talking to the people.
Yes.
Communicating.
Yes. Talking to the people may not be enough. Talking with the people may still not be enough. Acting in such a way that people find you trustworthy may be what is required. Because the people are distracted. Where are you going to meet them to talk to them? Already the structures for talking to them are not active. You have the federal government, you have the state government. What is it that local government chairmen do in this country? Then you have ward chairmen. Imagine that you do a TOT program for local government chairmen and ward chairmen. Now you are enabling them carry the story further downhill. It is not the one you organize in Yaradua Center or at the international conference, you say, town hall meeting. You go to a state capital, fill up the auditorium there, which probably has a capacity of 1,500. More than 80% of the people there are people like you and I who will go from the event to their houses. So you see that the concept of communication, national communication, the drill down that will go with it does not exist in public consciousness. So you record expenditure on communication because that town hall meeting may cost 25 million, but no evidence of impact. That's part of the crisis.
Okay, let's go. Just one more thing on this before we go to the court matter, because this seems to be taking on a life of its own. Well, before the president, before they approved that 5 billion, for 2 billion has been released, we just wonder from the outside. I mean, that's why we need you to help us understand this, shed some light if you can. How does it work? Because what I thought that since NEC said they think that formal register was not reliable. And they didn't have anything upon which they were going to predicate their distribution. How come the government went ahead and still approved that amount? Was there a condition precedent, or what exactly? What usually is the consideration before that kind of things happen? Or is it just political, or what?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's you've raised a very germane issue as to the procedure and what normally has to happen. Now, I must say this, that when my experience in government, this was a big issue. That look, whatever it is that government is going to do, especially on the social investment program, which was then domiciled in the office of the vice president where I worked. One of the things that was important to the vice president was, look, we have to find a way which this thing must get to the people that it was designed for. And that was why it devised the concept of, look, let the money, in some of the cases, this was, so we had the Empower program where we hired 500,000 otherwise unemployed graduates. And we said, look, what you have to do is that the money must go from the coffers of the government to the beneficiaries. And you have to remove the any kind of middle party. The same thing when we did the trader money. That the money must go directly from the coffers of the government to the beneficiaries. Now, so what we have here, if I'm right, is money going first to the state government. Makes sense, that they are the ones that are on the ground. But we must look at those things critically. Look at them critically. How do you deliver the thing, whatever it is, the good, the service, or whatever palliative, that it reaches the people and it reaches them on time. Prof said something and I wanted to say a little bit more about it. And I made a point earlier. There's a lot of distrust. And so this is why I am saying that we need to have a more transparent governance. And he had mentioned, so we have 3 levels of government. We have federal, we have state, we have local government. But the truth is that in this country, based on the way that we are conducting the affairs, the local governments are barely out of contention, and that is where the people live. That is where the people are. So are we really serious? And if we are, we have to find a way to transform, governance at that level.
So speaking about trust, let's get back to this topic now, which is on the presidential election petition court's ruling. That trust quotient, the deficit, seem to have crept in into interpretations of judgments from courts, as it were. So some of the highlights then was that INEC cannot be compelled to transmit results electronically, and then, of course, they dismissed that unanimous consolidated petition, unanimously dismissed. And so, Prof, in terms of, they say justice doesn't only have to be done, it must be seen to have been done. But at the moment, there are many who don't see that justice has been done. The parties naturally say they're going upstairs. They're going to appeal the matter. But so quite a number of people still think, nah.
There's something funny here. Well, on the statement of justice must be done and be seen to be done, it depends on who is looking.
We're not all supposed to be the same across the board.
You just might turn away when the justice was done. Then you turn back and say, oh, I didn't say it. But speaking seriously, I think first of all, I will congratulate both the opposition and the government. After the election, there has been no case of incitement. So that's something to commend PDP and Labour Party for. There's also been no offensive triumphalism from the ruling government. That's also something to commend them for. But beyond all of that, I want to establish some grounds to get to the issue you raised. If you go to court, there will be only one outcome. 2 possible outcomes. Either you win or you lose. So in going to the court, the parties knew they would either win or lose. That's number 1. Number 2, a court takes decisions based on the evidence before it. Now, a lot of us assume that all material tendered in court constitute evidence. It isn't. It's only what the court finds viable to enable a decision of a certain judicial validity that is evidence. And I take us back to 2019. PDP had what he thought was a strong case. He brought a lot of material to court, if you remember. Quite some bags, and everybody in the place was excited. In a roundtable discussion where I was involved, I told them, you haven't tendered any evidence before the court. So what do you mean? This is a lot of English. I said, okay. You know, while in Unilag, yes, my department was philosophy, but I taught jurisprudence for law students, the philosophy of law, for 3 years. No document is valid except there is a validating authority that presents it as custodian to the court. If I get a receipt from a contract from Channels Television today, and I take it to court, it's a scrap of paper. If Channel sends a staff with a stamp to come to the court and declare ownership and say this is ours, that's when it becomes something accepted. So here we make a decision between 3 things. Custodianship, access. I have a car. I give you the key. Because I gave it to you, you can use it. You have access, you have right of use. But custodian ownership inheres in me. Now, if he now takes the car from you, he has possession. But because there's no connection with me, you speak of stealing. Because it's the same car I'm holding. Why am I not called a thief? Why are you not called a thief? Now you migrate it to the issues in the court. You find that some of the submissions from the parties, particularly Labour, that they say they had difficulty with, were the question of, okay, you brought this document, but who is backing it up? The elementary matter of, polling agents not being there, they signed it. Those things are there. But there are also other things not apparent in that entire thing. Because if you look at the 10 witnesses that were practically thrown out, that their entries should have come 21 days before the judgment. You ask yourself, is it true that the same court has a judgment within the last 4 months that, that goes around that and allows post-21-day submission? There is. So as it is, they will have to take it to the next level. That's the right thing to do. It's not about name-calling or being angry. Invariably, it will be the court that will decide. Yes, a lot of people feel that already there's the presumption. There's the presumption of integrity deficit and that the likely outcome is known, but let us wait and see it. What I see is an outcome that some people are not happy about, and the one that particularly the president is happy about because he said he couldn't sleep. So the process goes on. But the thing is, I think also particularly the Labour Party lawyers, they were made to look incompetent if you look at the judgment. Look extremely incompetent, but looking incompetent is different from being incompetent. There are details about the rejected 10 witnesses that they could have taken on after the judgment. By choosing to be silent, they've allowed public opinion to drown.
That's the lawyers?
Oh, the lawyers, yes. Because, it doesn't have to be then the party could also, because this is political engagement, but they just went home to bed, and anybody reading it will say, these people just took Peter's money and ate. But there are things they could have said that will have aided both public understanding, judicial insight, public discourse, and some level of anticipation towards the Supreme Court judgment. This is a political case. It's not
Maybe they don't want to let the cat out of the bag.
There is no cat in the bag. The cat is playing in the field. A case has been decided at a law. You're going to go upstairs with it. So that decision has political components you can share in the domain, in the public domain, and you're not doing that. And everything suggests that how could you go to court if this was all there is? But it isn't, and they're not telling anybody. So they continue to look silly, with all due respect.
All right, so welcome back to Sunrise. Ilalu, go ahead and let's get your response on the impression that people have of the judgment.
Yeah, so I think 2 things. First of all, the lawyers of the petitioners, and I think this point has been made over and over again, I think they still have quite a bit of explanation, even in the court of public opinion, to give some kind of response. Now, this is a very serious case. This is a presidential. The stakes are so high. How is it that the justices said that they brought hearsay testimonies? These are serious people. The justices said that in open court to the hearing of all Nigerians, live television for 12 hours. They've not responded. I know they're preparing for the Supreme Court, which is what they should do. But in terms of even building confidence with the people, letting people understand what is going on, you need to respond to that. The justices gave an example of some of the evidences, quote unquote, videos that were not tagged. They brought videos of the election. They didn't say where
what it was about.
They didn't what date. You know, I mean, listening to that, you know, I was just wondering that how is this possible? These are very serious. These are very serious lawyers. The second point that I think we also have to talk about is that ultimately in the democracy, the rule of law is an imperative. You know, and while we can have a discussion about, you know, justices and judges and judgments and everything, look, when the courts rule, you know, we have to comply. You know, so I think ultimately, you know, and maybe we're not there yet, but I think that ultimately what we have to have is a further discussion on electoral reforms, and I will expect the president, you know, or whoever, you know, however this ends, to come back and say that, look, we have to, you know, look at the electoral laws again, you know, and what else can we do? And we need to be refining those laws. I mean, the very idea of electoral reform, we need to keep our teeth at every experience. So we've seen in this election that we were promised, you know, that we will have the report on the high ref read.
So INEC cannot be mandated, you know, to transmit those results.
Yeah, so because they say that the law didn't say so.
Even though INEC said so.
Even though INEC said so. So why INEC has been able to explain to the justices and say that, oh, look, this is we're not compelled by the law. You know,
how do we even believe INEC again tomorrow if they tell us?
So INEC itself has the work to do to try and rebuild the trust, and they ought to even be at the forefront of pushing for the reforms. The president, you know, at the end of the day himself, ought to also come out, just like President Yar'Adua did, to say that, look, I understand that we have to fix the electoral process. And I think a lot of what we should do at the end of the day is to come back and look at electoral reforms. What else can we do? And there are quite a lot of things to pursue.
Ayo Buki.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Perhaps we'll get the time to look at, you know, the dilemma that portion of the Electoral Act and the ruling of the court justices, you know, where it leaves us. But let me follow up on what now seems to be an emerging debate as a result of the court's ruling on the status of Abuja. Professor Okechukwu, I'm coming to you now. I wonder if that ruling is as clear as it should be, because the court says no special status attached to the FCT as it is equal to every other state in Nigeria. You know, one would say if it is equal to every other state in Nigeria, why shouldn't, you know, 25% be required of a winning candidate in the election, you know, on that? And what the Abuja indigenes have now done, heading to the court for interpretation and demanding a governor, 3 senators, House of Reps, you know, and State Assembly, is it a disagreement with the court ruling of the justices of the appeal court of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal? Professor Okechukwu, that's for you.
No, I'll start from the question of equality. There's nominal equality and there's substantive equality. Nominally, all the states are equal. Substantively, they are not equal when you consider population, when you consider the level of human capital development, or what do you call it, indices of development. So that in itself is a subsisting notion in public conversation. Then the ruling of the court would seem to be, in ordinary interpretation, a violation of the provision, because the Constitution says, and the FCT, not and or. So interpreting it strictly, it will mean mandatorily for the FCT, you must have 25%. But it has given its ruling based on the notion that, okay, it cannot be more important, because the element that appeared emphasized subliminally in that judgment is that if you say 25% can prevent somebody from being president, what it means then is that the deciding variable, ultimately, more than any other thing in the country, would be FCT. That might have conditioned that judgment. But in the court of public opinion, the perception is that that decision does not run well with both the spirit and the letter of the general understanding of that constitutional provision. Now, as for the residents or indigents of FCT going to court, we need to understand the political implications going forward. If in the first instance the equality is established, in which case it is interpreted in the sense that FCT is a state, it must mean that FCT should have a governor. So this is only one leg in their own movement towards an affirmation of an identity and a status that will have to be recognized politically. But when you also consider the history of the FCT, that it was carved out at some point, and that the area was marked out, population was taken, compensations were paid to owners of the lands, resettlements took place, and even more recently, when the centenary city was being set up, and some people still said, oh, part of ancestral land, in conjunction with FCT and FCDA, the centenary city authorities or managers or whatever also pay them out. So the further question that will arise is, okay, if you say you are a state and that you deserve to have a governor, and where you're living and where you're calling your place is lands that the federal government has paid for, compensated the original occupiers, we're going to make a refund in order to claim a state and then emphasizing citizenship, indigenship. Of course, the compensation wasn't paid to all in the case of the federal government after relocating them. These are the convoluted things that are likely to arise as further conversation on this. So any expectation that once they run out of court, the next thing will be to have them declared a state. It's a long haul from this. But if I'm an indigene or if I'm from this part of the country, I will certainly join those going to court because the Nigerian state has become more of a sharing assembly than a working assembly. So a state means another plate you can put on the table to share, to get a share. I think that's part of what is driving it. But more importantly, all of these have thrown up issues with the Constitution that will need further work if we are to go forward with a clear and straightforward understanding of some of its provisions.
Interesting, and some have joked that the ambiguity is to make the lawyers, enable the lawyers smile to the bank, and that's why it has remained that way. But on that part of the conversation that Mr. Laolu was exploring, on expounding on earlier, the ruling on the IREF portal, and the position of the justices that INEC is not mandated to transmit elections to the IREF portal based on what the Electoral Act says, that it is, the way INEC deems fit. Is it a commitment or a lack of it, as Justice Samani had said earlier, that the court will not waste time on technicalities, or it has somewhat adopted technicalities, in its ruling?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I guess your dream. Can you restate the question properly? What the question is?
Okay, Mr. Konde. Mr. Konde, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Have the justices gone the way of technicalities based on that part of that ruling, contrary to the commitment made by Justice Samani ahead of the ruling that it would not waste time on technicalities?
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, I think that on the question, I'm not a lawyer, but at least we all went to school. On the question of what the law said regarding whether INEC ought to or is mandated to post the result on IREF, I think it's fairly clear that the law, the Act itself, did not mandate INEC to do that. So I'm not sure that's the technicality. That seems to be something that is quite apparent. What the problem is, or what the problem was, is the fact that you had INEC actively engaging Nigerians, assuring them, because they know that part of their own mandate is also voter education, in order to get the people to be excited and to be part of the process, which is a good thing. We need people to be part of the process. And I think in trying to do that, they sold the idea to the people. The people were excited of the idea of real-time reporting online, which gives people the impression that, oh, okay, I mean, this thing might even help the process. We can trust it, and people, they caught that bug, if I can use that, and was expecting, that ultimately this was going to happen. Now, when the elections happened, you had the presidential elections and National Assembly elections, and I think in some cases, the National Assembly elections were even posted, but it was the presidential election that wasn't. So that created a lot of distrust with the people. So I don't think that it was so much of a technicality. I think indeed it was clear in the law that INEC was not mandated on that specific issue. It was their own guideline. Although we've also had arguments of people that say that, look, if the Constitution says that INEC will give guidelines, and then this was their guideline, you could also tie that back to the Constitution. But I'm not sure that the judges bought that argument. The important thing was that the justices, affirmed the law, which sort of clarified and helped INEC to get out of that dilemma. But INEC is right in the middle of the dilemma of trust with the people, and INEC, like I said, will have to do a lot of work to rebuild trust. And I think INEC and the president should be at the forefront of electoral reforms.
It's interesting.
A way of trying to assuage some of these fears.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talked about whether or not it's a technicality, and it leads me to the question of whether or not people have been duly educated. Prof, let me ask you that. I'm glad, Prof, that earlier you mentioned that you've had some conversations with some lawyers in the area of jurisprudence and all of that. One of the questions that I've asked lawyers before on this program is, given the way it went, the details, the length of hours that we spent, everyone all over the world, listening to the judgments and the final decision, Prof, I want to ask you, how much of education do you think we have had from that experience? Speaking as a layman, speaking as young people, for young people, if you can, those who are illiterate, if I can put it that way, in the legalese, how educating would you say it was?
I will disaggregate it like you suggested, for young people, for the general adult public, and for the legalese you're talking about. At the level of the youth, I think they are likely to have found the judgment long-winding, too long, confusing, such that even at the point of arrival, they were no longer sure what the issues were. And so a lot of them walked out saying, well, okay, there's something they wanted to say. So they talked until we were feeling sleepy. Then they said what they wanted to say. So for a lot of young people, there's not even anger. There's just confoundment and a shrugging of the shoulders. Well, we thought this would happen. And at that level, even the good in the judgment is also missed. Now, for the general public, a number of things, like Laulu mentioned, if you tender a document, it has to be tagged. If you have a video of people rigging elections, we need to know who they are, where it took place, and the time, and it should be verifiable. Otherwise, it opens room for somebody. Any of us can go and record a video where I symbols, set up a ballot box, and tender it in court. So that lapse is inexcusable and unfortunate. And of course, like I said in my initial comments, what is brought before the court is material presumed to be evidence. It's the court that determines that this is evidence and viable evidence. And it's also the court that determines out of available evidence what is relevant for a verdict or for a decision. So all of that on the table. Then at the level of legalese, for instance, the issue of INEC guidelines and the Constitution, let us make a slight distinction. Here, I will refer back to some issues in jurisprudence. There was this hypothetical situation that Lomfula created in his book, where some people, about 6 or 8 people, had an accident and were trapped in a mountain. They were freezing to death. There was no food. They couldn't get out of where they were trapped because a massive boulder blocked the place. So they were there. Then one of them suggested, look, rather than all of us starve to death, let us cast ballot, and whoever loses will be killed and eaten by the others so that the rest will survive. And they agreed. They cast the ballot. Unfortunately, it was the person who made the suggestion that the ballot fell on, and they ate him. About 9 days later or thereabouts, they were rescued, and then I think relatives of the one that was killed sued for murder. And look, you killed our brother and ate him and all of that. So he went to court, and they all pleaded that it was a general agreement. We agreed, and so the judge said, at the time of this decision, there was a massive rock blocking the entrance to your cave. He said, yes. He said, but that rock does not separate you from humanity. Humans don't eat humans. What am I trying to say with that? INEC guidelines, if it is not in strict compliance with the letter and spirit of the Constitution, can always be invalidated by the judiciary, the same with any law. So if INEC guidelines and INEC pronouncements have a different coloration, one takes precedence. But where it creates a problem, even for INEC and for the judiciary, is there's already the perception of integrity challenge. There's a suspicion, there was a suspicion prior to every other thing that took place that they are going to look for technicalities to navigate this. Because if you recall, when INEC was subsequently challenged to respond to its own statement, there was silence from INEC. So from the legal angle, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure a lot of, I suspect, because to say I'm sure means I've consulted the lawyers. I believe and suspect that a lot of lawyers will be a little uncomfortable about the judgment, the length of the judgment, the issues advanced to lead to the verdict delivered, and in some cases what appeared to be rigmarole, and ultimately the perception that this is a predetermined outcome for which they only needed to move around a lot before they get to it. But all of that is still at the level of possibilities. They are still the upper court to go to. Where it presents a problem at that level is that already, even before it's gone there, people are saying, well, what do you expect? They will also go there and get the same result.
Before you
so in substantive terms, for the young people, the judgment is confounding.
Prof, if you can hear me. Yeah. Before you go off the issue of INEC guidelines that you talked about, I've often asked the question whether or not those guidelines should be justiciable. I don't know. I mean, you may or may not be able to speak to it. Because, for instance, when, regulatory bodies like, say, CBN, for instance, issue guidelines to banks, those guidelines have as much force as though they were part of the Banking Act. They initiate those regulations per the law. INEC regulations were also issued per the law. So given the confusion, as you put it the other time, that this kind of perception has created, shouldn't those guidelines also be justiciable?
I'm not sure they should, for a simple reason. You see, guidelines are supposed, you remember that some party guidelines have been thrown out by the courts when some people challenged it. The guideline is supposed to derive from the law as facilitating processes. We've told you, go and find out how many people are living in Lugbe. You make a law that each street will be counted, you create guidelines, each street will be counted by 3 people. It's deriving from the law. Now, since it is the judiciary that will determine the validity otherwise of any guideline, whether from the Constitution or even clear constitutional provisions, to that extent, it will be difficult to fault a judicial decision that discountenances guidelines. Because in the order of precedence, the judicial decision would take precedence since it is the judiciary that's to interpret even the Constitution and the validity of some of its provisions. Ideally, and I would prefer that those guidelines are justiciable, that on the basis of it you can go to court and get a decision. But to the extent that there are provisions that present possibilities of doubt about the autonomy and authenticity, a standalone value of the guideline, to that extent would it be difficult for somebody not to use technicalities and escape wherever those guidelines are involved.
Well, talking about guidelines, Prof, I know that a number of, I'd love to take on Mr. Akonde on a number of things that he had raised earlier, but talking about guidelines, Prof, the question is still for you. You are not unaware of issues being raised by some institutions of higher learning now concerning, increase in school fees. So, Prof, in terms of how those things come out, in terms of the reactions that are following those things right now, in terms of, because I saw one video, a young lady was literally crying and wailing that if these things continue this way, she may have to drop out of school, and she cannot afford to drop out of school. There is conversation around the student's loan, but whether or not that has taken off, that's another conversation altogether. And the schools put out, I think it was Unilag that put out a guideline earlier in the year, sometime in July, that there's going to be increments. What do you make of the processes, making the rounds about that one, particularly in the light of the realities that we have on our hands now, given the conversation you and my colleagues had earlier when the program began?
No, every university has a right to fix its own rules in terms of fees, etc. Schools will not charge the same thing. If you don't like one school, you go to another. Now, these guidelines are also supposed to be sensitive to the realities of the operating environment, whereas the university itself also must be sensitive to its own continued survival. Now, the summary point I'm making is this. If you think a guideline or a position taken by an institution is not in order, take it to court. Now, that video, if that girl cries from now till the end of the world and probably 2 days after that, it will not impact the decision of the university. But if somebody goes to court and that decision is challenged and there's a court decision saying no, given the state of the economy, inflation is at 8%, you've increased your own by 46%, you're not even sensitive to the degree of inflation, whereas we allow you to increase your fees, it cannot be beyond this percentage of the existing fee. That becomes, a judicial decision, becomes precedent for subsequent action. So, any guideline can and should be challenged. Social media activism will not impact the executive decision in a university council because it is what lawyers will call saying by the way, pedestrian debate. Something is going on outside, it doesn't concern us. So what I would rather urge is, if the fees are outrageous, and I think that most of them are given the economic realities, people should take the schools to court. If there's a court decision on that, then it becomes something people can work with. That's one of the good things why Ghani did for Nigeria. He took a lot of things to court and created precedents that are guiding many constitutional issues today.
Interesting perspective, but Mr. Akonde, you mentioned earlier talking about building trust and the rest of it. How much of that do you think could happen with students now, given this reality that a good number of them all over the nation have to contend with? How do we ensure that we don't win in one area and lose in another area and consequently frustrate the entire development process? Building trust, communicating with people, particularly young people, about whatever it is that we are doing as a nation that will affect their lives immediately and the hereafter.
Okay, so the bottom line is government exists to deliver certain services, the welfare and security of the people. So the way to build the trust is for the government to do what it ought to do and to be seen to be doing what it ought to do. So in this case, what is important to the students is that, just like the lady that you referenced, how am I going to get through school? And that's why the idea of the student loan seemed to be a very interesting bill that was signed to law. I think that was the very first bill that was signed to law by Mr. President. And we must commend whoever are the people behind the thing. I think it was the former speaker himself that actually proposed that bill while he was still in the House, and right at the time that the president got into power, it was signed. Now, we must make sure that the student loan, whatever it is able to offer, is available at the earliest opportunity. and available in such a way that people can actually access it. I can give an example of places like the United States, where, look, once you get admission, you know that your fees are going to be paid. If you don't get a bit of scholarship, from charitable organizations or the school itself, there are a set of companies that will offer you different kinds of loans. And the federal government also has one or two options that you can use to get a loan. So you know that whatever happens, you will be true. I mean, you will make your tuition. You will spend 3 years or 4 years, and everything will be okay. That is what is important in this particular instance. Let's get on the implementation of the student's loan. Let's find a way that it is not implemented in a difficult way. Let us ensure that the conditions are not such that people cannot actually benefit from it. Whatever has to be done to facilitate that process for the federal government, making the guarantees for the agencies that will be loaning, federal government can do that. Federal government can throw its weight. Federal government can secure all kinds of arrangements to make sure that people can get it and that the students get it on time. That is how to build trust. You build trust as a government by doing what the people expect you to do and do it transparently so that people don't just hear that it is done, but people see that it is done.
Speaking of building trust, back to the presidential election petition tribunal, many have been looking critically at the justices. I'm coming to you now, Professor Ukechukwu, the 5-man panel. We have Justice Bolaji I've forgotten the surname now, the only female justice. We have Justice Stephen Ada, Justice Haruna Samani, Justice Mohammed Bello. But there is that observation that there is no justice from the Southeast, and that considering the magnitude and importance of the case that they had to dispense with, the presidential election petition, how important was it for the 5-man panel to have included a justice from the Southeast? They even cite that in the U.S. Supreme Court, there is also that agitation for the inclusion of a black judge. So in this case now, how important was it? Did we miss something important with the absence of a justice from the Southeast in that panel?
Maybe we missed two things: the optics of it, how it looks, and the perception of the inclusivity. Beyond that, it would not be entirely fair to suggest that the absence of somebody from a particular part of the country necessarily brings into disrepute any decision arising from the team setup. That's in principle and speaking objectively. Speaking in purely political terms and within our context, which is Nigeria, the perception is that it would have been better, more reassuring, so that it won't look like their brother Peter Obi was taken to a foreign abattoir, brought before foreign butchers and slaughtered by foreign butchers. That's actually that's where the challenge of perception is. So I think they could have done a little better in terms of the optics of it. It would have had a better effect on public consciousness. But then, let's also push it further, since you're talking about the Southeast. We are familiar with this treatment of the Southeast. You look at the entire 8 years of Buhari's government. Where was the Southeast? Where was it? Not anywhere. If it existed, it must be on paper. The only appointments we could remember was, I think, Ngige. I don't remember who else. Ngige, of course, is easy to remember because he's spent and Oboneono, yes. Oboneono, it's only now that I'm remembering he was a minister.
What about the Minister of State for Education?
Let's not go there. So, Ngige, I could easily remember because, I mean, for the 8 years, he was quarreling with people, so it was easy to remember him. And now that's all the Southeast got under Buhari. You look at the appointments of service chiefs, etc. So this is not new. This is what is happening all the time. And if you look at the current configuration, I think Southeast has 8 slots, where others, Northeast and the rest have 10. That subsists. So I believe the government should work on the optics, how things appear when we do them. But to move from there and claim that because there's nobody from the Southeast, the panel is therefore imperiled or brought into disrepute, I do not agree.
So, Prof, What about, I mean, when you say that, I mean, when they read the materials brought were not tagged, and I'm just wondering, because, I mean, for media folks, if they want to tag them, quote unquote, depends on what they mean by tagging in courts, because it's not layman's English, probably. And if they do that and give it all those captioning, wouldn't they then subsequently argue in court, say, my lord, these materials have been tampered with, this is not how it was originally? Won't that come up at some point?
Tagging is different from tampering. If you're traveling and you bring your box, they weigh it, they confirm the weight, then they get a piece of that material, put the weight, and tag the box. Now, that doesn't interfere with the content, it doesn't interfere with the lock, it doesn't interfere with the integrity of the box in any way. It's an external attachment.
That's why it's hard for people to believe that these senior lawyers didn't tag these materials.
No. What for me is even more disturbing was after the experience of 2019, that this could happen. You see, this happens when also, that's why when you're very high up there in a profession, you must have assistants whose feet are squarely on the ground. Most of the time, you have a lot of excitement on the strength of evidence, but they are anecdotal evidence. You saw, for instance, the video of Oluomo. Somebody said to be Oluomo. That man never denied that he was the one in that video. So to the extent that there has been no rejection or denial or contestation of that, that's the man. And other people who are stopping people from voting. Now, as those making the case against Tinubu are watching those things, they are very excited. This shows the election was rigged, but they forget they are talking in somebody's parlor. This is not before the court. So one thing that the opposition, particularly Labour Party and Obedience, need to learn is that there is a sphere of engagement. This thing from a sphere of contemplation and appreciation. You can try out all your wrestling skills in your compound, but the village square is where it takes place.
If I may bring this up here, Prof. I want to add it to what you're saying, Prof. Are you implying that almost over 300 years of experience combined in that court could have missed out that kind of angle?
No. It will not be fair because these lawyers were prepared. They were banking, I believe, on the fact that the appeal court already had a subsisting decision that admitted a kind of circumstance that affected the 10 witnesses. They were shocked to discover that the court did not follow its own precedent. So I believe they relied more on the substance of the case. But on the issue you're raising, yes, it will be shocking, especially seeing what PDP did last year in 2019, brought a lot of materials they were going to. I told the guys I was talking with, any material in court without a custodian in whom it inheres has no legal validity. And all of that.
So, Lalu, okay, sorry, Prof, go ahead, land on that matter.
No. To land on this thing, so in terms of how everything has played out, it is for the lawyers of the PDP and the Labour Party to prepare themselves better. But more particularly for the Labour Party, needs to do three things. It needs to now organize and become a well-positioned party all over the country. This is the time to begin to build a structure. Their candidate, I think last week, he gave 50 million to the Anglican Church. So if he can afford that, let him also gather people who will put money together and build substantive party offices all over the country. That's number one. Engage in political education. While hoping they win in Supreme Court, they'll be preparing. If we win, this is how we'll be doing. If we don't win, this is how we'll prepare for 2023.
Scenario planning, SWOT analysis. But Lalu, as communication folks, when you see all of those things play out, and you ask yourself, I mean, judiciary, jurisprudence here, they're usually, strict in terms of the way they practice, unlike in some of the claims in states, for instance, where they elect judges, so they haven't gotten to that realm here. So does this clearly, or maybe not clearly, maybe not that clear, it does appear as though there are areas of, because I mean, both of you have highlighted the communication on the part of lawyers, so that, or is it that they completely jettison what happens in the court of public opinion? Because at some point, one of the justices made reference to social media, because we thought, they always said, look, whatever happens in the court of public opinion stays there. This is what is before us. We adjudicate based on that, and if you can't prove your case before us, unfortunately not. So How do you see all of that?
No, I mean, I certainly believe that what happens in the public opinion does have an impact on what happens in court. You know, I've worked, especially in the last 8 years, with a lot of lawyers, including the vice president himself, and you know, I know that even lawyers are well aware of how whatever is happening in the public opinion might play a role in the court, but that is where the diligence of the lawyers come to play. Now, I don't know whether people have observed, there are certain lawyers today in Nigeria that are considered to be the leading experts in electoral matters. And I think, over, especially since 1999, you find this set of lawyers playing very leading roles in many of the cases. And what has happened is that the APC has managed, clearly, have managed to always ensure that those lawyers are in their corner. So that's a very subtle, significant role, in all of this, even in the way that the cases are presented in some of the dynamics that you see in the court. I mean, look at Mr. Chief Olanipekun, just brought in one witness, and got the whole thing sorted out. So I think that yes, the public opinion is very important, but it is up to the lawyers. I mean, the way we see it, how the lawyer argue in court, is able to bring whatever is substantial outside, or whatever is not substantial outside, brings it in to become a substantial point to impress the judges. So it ends up with whether the lawyers are well prepared, or at least in the estimation of the judges, in the assessment of the judges, whether they are well prepared, whether they have done what they are supposed to do. Because look, I mean, people are going to talk about those comments by the justices about the fact that, there has been lack of diligence on the part of some of the petitioners' lawyers.
Yeah, but what about when the people also feel that referencing what went on with social media as though they wanted to bully the judges, it's tantamount to some of them saying, wait a minute, is that the mindset that they have with delivery? Do they want to make a point? That's why we took that much time to explain everything in pieces. And so when you go to Supreme Court, we don't know what else you might bring.
Well, I mean, actually, so that would be a psychoanalysis of how the human mind works. And I'm not going to rule that out completely. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm not going to rule that out completely, that is possible. And this is the point, that what is happening in the public place and also influence human beings. Certainly, I won't rule it out.
We'll come before go, Prof.
Yeah. In also speaking of it, I think there's very urgent need for lawyers, senior lawyers, experienced people in the legal profession to pay some attention to ICT. If you notice all the interrogation, presumed interrogation of those who came to make technical presentations, in one instance, I think the defense lawyer asked a question and then said, no, I'm too angry. I want anybody looking more closely gets the impression he didn't know what else to say because he wasn't familiar with the content. The judiciary, the NBA should take this as an issue, that ICT literacy, cybersecurity literacy, understanding of technology in the management of social affairs and particularly elections becomes an entry education point going forward for legal practitioners in Nigeria.
All right, Professor Okechukwu, Executive Director, Development Specs Academy, as well as Laulu Akunde, former presidential aide. Gentlemen, thank you both for coming on today.
Thank you.
All right, well, back in just a moment. Ayo Bugi.
So what we've done is put in place new measures that would ensure that there is effective diligence done on the part of both sides. That's the UAE authorities as well as the Nigerian authorities in making sure that any Nigerian citizen who is seeking to travel to the UAE, for example, is being thoroughly scrutinized, not in a way that is prejudicial, not in a way that is presumptuous or negative, but in a way that ensures that well-meaning citizens, people who want to go do business, or people who want to get an education, or people who want to participate as active and productive citizens, in those domains, that they are those people. But then to add new dimensions to that relationship, a partnership that are mutually beneficial to both nations. And I think as we move forward, the details of those investments, the details of the foreign exchange liquidity program that's been jointly agreed to by both countries will become clear. And I do want to add, this was not in the statement earlier today, I want to add that there are ongoing kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's between the respective ministers from both countries, as well as the national security advisors of both countries, as we really formalize kind of the more minute details of the agreement. But those details will be made available as soon as that's done.
Let's have a conversation around that this morning with Kayode Joseph Ogungbo, who is President, Professional Nigerians in the UAE. He joins us over the phone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Ogungbo. How is your community? Thank you very much. Yes, how is your community receiving this information, this negotiation, this G2G, government-to-government conversation that many would say is rather rare, but it's not that something that doesn't happen?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. We welcome the development with great euphoria because we've been in the situation for a while, and sincerely speaking, it's a welcome development. We appreciate the commitment to normalization of relationship between Nigeria and UAE. We also want to thank our President, His Excellency, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, also the President of UAE, for this special interest in the relationship between these two countries. The Nigerians in UAE welcome this, and we appreciate it a lot.
Mr. Ogungbo, prior to this time, reports from the UAE by our correspondent suggested that there had also been, Nigerians had also begun to see the easing on restrictions on work permits and residency license, or whatever they call it there in the UAE. What would you ascribe this to? Had the conversations on the easing of, the diplomatic relations between Nigeria and UAE begun prior to this time, or it's just, one of the low-hanging fruits that we have now seen in the lifting of the visa ban?
Let me first of all let you know that by the announcement from Chief Ajuri Igelali, the special advisor to the President on Media and Publicity yesterday, we want to put everything that has happened in the past behind us and focus on the progress of the future. Presently, we might have passed through some pains in the past, but now we are happy. We want to continue in that regard, to respect the law, to put in our best into the economy of UAE, and to let the two governments be in harmony. That is what we should be looking at this time.
Speaking of being ready to obey the law, at the time, at the height of the straining of diplomatic relations, former president had said that, yes, indeed, some Nigerians broke the law, but it was not enough for the UAE to impose restrictions. How have the authorities in the country reined in on the activities of such Nigerians?
Let me also inform you that UAE have a very good security architecture. And if anybody commit any crime, such person can be apprehended within a twinkle of eye. So we have the belief in UAE government in that, and whoever that decide to disobey the government law, they should be ready to face the wrath of the law. So we believe that the offense of one person will not make many people suffer anymore. So this is, as I said earlier, we are happy now. We don't want to look into this. We don't have power over this. As community here in UAE, we will continue to engage ourselves and our members to be a very good ambassador of Nigeria wherever they find themselves, not only in UAE, and to respect the law of the country. If there is commitment to normalcy of relationship between the two countries, we are sure that the collaboration will help the citizens to do well. It is a welcome development that there is immediate lift on ban of the visa. We also believe this will extend to the work permit. It is with great pleasure and joy that we welcome Etihad Airline and Emirates Airline back. Many Nigerians are working in these airlines. They will be making traveling easy for Nigerians, and government also will be making money from this. So if all this can happen and other things that will be happening between the government, Nigeria and UAE will be happy, and UAE government also will be happy. Nigeria government also will also be happy.
And you had now begun to answer my initial question about the work permits. How easy is it for Nigerians now, prior to this time, to secure their work permits in the UAE? And then going forward, what does this lifting of the visa ban, what does it mean for the businesses of Nigerians and indeed, their professions of Nigerians in the UAE?
The lifting of the ban is a great relief. It's going to be like a fertilizer on a desert land, because some businesses are suffering because of the ban. People are not able to come in, but now they will be able to come in. When you talk of work permit is renewed for people that are working. And there is not any official statement from UAE government up to date that there is ban on this. And with this, if people renew their work permit, and with this latest development, we believe that the new work permit also will not be any problem anymore. Why businesses will continue to thrive and be progressing with the latest development. To me and many other people, it's a welcome development, and it's going to contribute a lot to the well-being and financial strength of people of Nigeria in UAE.
Just to be clear, Mr. Okungbo, for those who are not aware how we got to this point in the first place, can you give us a quick background, and how do we ensure it doesn't happen again, so another government-to-government initiative doesn't have to step in to save the day?
Yes, thank you very much. How we got to this place is difficult for me to explain to you through this medium. But I want to let you know that in UAE, we have United Nigeria stakeholders. We have citizens in UAE. We have pro-Nigeria in UAE. We have NIDO. We have many other groups like that connect with Nigerians in the UAE. And our connection with them is to educate ourselves on how to obey the law of our host country, how to be good ambassador of our country in a foreign land. These are the things we will be looking at. But how we got to this point, all of us know that it has not been easy since June 2021. But what we heard yesterday has taken away our nightmare, and it has given us a new dream.
It goes back to the same question, Mr. Okungbo, because as you said, there are quite a number of agencies of government, representations of Nigerians in diaspora all over the place, and in the UAE, no less as well. So if we are not able to identify, how we got to this point, and we have a number of people who, with this lifting of visa ban and the rest of them now, there's going to be quite a number of people flowing into the UAE altogether, all over again. So if they don't know how easy their steps should be, there might be the challenge of them also doing the same things that brought us here in the first place. That's why I'm asking this question for those who are not aware, to be aware and be guided.
Yes, I appreciate that, and I want to tell you again. According to Chief Ajuri Ngelali, he has made some explanation that the deal that the two countries reached yesterday will not just come like that. There will be some criteria for maybe for visa, for employment, for businesses. Those things will be there. So, as I said, I'm not in position to say this is what happened, this is what happened. I'm not aware of many of those things. I'm only aware that since 2021 June, we are having issue with renewal of work permit, and at the time, renewal started going till now. Then thereafter, issue of visit visa came in, and yesterday we heard that it has been lifted. That is all I can say about that. But I have mentioned some organizations here in UAE. They are not government organizations. They are voluntary organizations that want to be educating Nigerians coming to UAE on what to do and how to do.
Very quickly.
To the Nigeria Embassy and Consulate of Nigeria in Dubai. They have made some plans on the Nigerians' identity card and so many other things to connect with the grassroots in the community for us to be a law-abiding citizen. Those I know, and I know that everybody that has passed through this phase, we know the importance of freedom.
Very quickly now,
and the importance of progress.
Mr. Gungbo, very quickly, these voluntary organizations and your mission to educating Nigerians, does it also incorporate into the education that all-important need, to engage with the UAE authorities such that even when Nigerians err, their rights are protected and they're not just thrown into prisons?
Well, you can. It is not within the reach of the voluntary organization to do that. The Nigeria Embassy is here. The Consulate of Federal Republic of Nigeria to Dubai, another emirate, is here. If anybody have anything and they need to inform the government, they can go to the embassy. And also, the embassy has opened the register for people to register themselves in UAE. If anybody is working in UAE, living and working in UAE, they are supposed to have their names there. So if by chance there is anything and they are in police net or for anything, they can easily contact they know how they contact the embassy or the consulate to find out if that person is known to the embassy or known to the consulate, and the procedure that's required to be taken will be followed.
Which also begs the question of Nigerians ensuring that they are documented whenever they get into any country. We have to thank you very much at this point. Kayode Ogungbo is President, Professional Nigerians in the UAE. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
All right, so some of your own contribution to the program today. Let's see how many of them we can take within the little time we have. Festus Akinboyewayo is the first. It's a tweet. The PEPT judges, or PEPC judges, should be commended for bringing transparency to their judgments. All attempts to blackmail the judges failed and will continue to fail. The sad thing is that those who chose not to learn will not learn. Those who will never see the truth will not see the truth. Truth is in computer language. The petitions were garbage in, garbage out, period.
Well, this is another tweet from Oshinawa Kinsley, and he says, in all of this, it's the issue of 25% in Abuja that beats my amusement. The Constitution clearly states the basic attributes and benefits of all states. Even when Lagos was FCT, it was treated as a state with governor, assembly, rep. That needs some explanation. Well, the debate has started on that one.
And Professor Inakina says, 2023 PEPC judgment. We must continue to reform the electoral process in parts that are being contentious or disputed, as it were. We must vet and reform the appointment and employment processes of INEC staff. This will reaffirm and ensure its independence and neutrality in the conduct of elections. The electoral malpractices in Nigeria are perpetrated by the politicians. No political party is exempt from this rancorous process, which is a form of political banditry. The entire citizenry must eschew the abuse of electoral integrity, which continues to undermine the ethos of our collective will of our nationhood in building a new democratic, new Nigeria where votes truly count. That's Professor Inakina.
Well, Akin says the best approach for the palliative distribution is for government to reduce payee tax. This puts money directly in the pockets of the working class. This would increase disposable income with trickle-down effect to informal sector and markets. It will stimulate the economy rather than giving rice and beans, as it is also easy to monitor. So.
Where did you find beans?
They go together, don't they? Okay, guys, well, that is the show today. We do thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain, so.
And I'm Neil Tagbe. Have a good day.
Well, at least that gives you inspiration for what you'll have for breakfast this morning. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Koka.
And exposes your favorite meal. Have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo Makinde.